this video, I'm going to be giving you 5 tips on what you can do to have a successful admissions interview, specifically if English isn't your first language. I have not heard of anyone who has been through this process who hasn't been asked this question in one. Ultimately, you're going to get a question that you weren't prepared for, and so tip number 4. So if you're here, it's probably because you've been invited to interview for a nurse practitioner program in the US. So first of all, congratulations. And second of all, it's terrifying, isn't it? My name is Melissa from Medical English with Melissa, and as you can guess from my name, I teach medical English. So I teach English specifically to healthcare professionals who don't speak English as a first language, who are working to improve their English with medical colleagues that are English speaking or with English speaking patients. And I also do mentoring and interview prep for nurses who are applying to graduate schools in the US. So back when I went through the interview process, I took it super seriously and I treated it as if it were a full-time job. I read books on it, I joined forums on it and found all the old information from previous cohorts, and I probably went a little bit overboard with it, but that's besides the point right now. And as a result, I got into every program I applied to, including all 3 of the Ivy League schools I had applied to. And so I got to choose which school I wanted to go to. And I learned a ton from the process. And so that's what I'm going to be talking about today. So I'm going to go right into tip number 1. And tip number 1, I feel like it's a little bit brutal, but it's honest and it's going to be really helpful. And it's that they're not going to remember that much about you. They'll remember parts of the interview. They'll remember the big significant things about you that made you unique or some memorable story that you told, but they're not going to remember everything. They interview a bunch of people all in a short time span, and as much as they write down and as much as they want to get to know you completely and holistically, ultimately they're human like all of us, and they're only going to remember a few significant, unique things about you. So think about when you had to go pick a house or an apartment and you had a ton of options to choose from. They're all unique and have different things about them, and there's a lot to keep in mind about all of them. But think about how you end up referring to them. You end up saying things like, oh yeah, it was the house with the red door, or it was the one with a beautiful kitchen but that super gross bathroom, right? So you come up with these short ways to talk about things, right? So what you need to do is realize that if they only remember so much about you, what do you want that to be? And so my tip for you is to realize this, decide what those things are instead of letting them decide for you. And so what I mean is if you go into the interview and you're all over the place and you're not thinking about your main message, you don't really know what they're going to remember about you. But if you go into the interview with a clear mind of exactly what you want them to remember about you, it's going to go a lot better for you. So what I want you to do is write this down and then try and fill it out, okay? The blank nurse who blank and blank, okay? And I'll explain it in just a sec, but the blank nurse who blank and blank. So you might come up with something like the ER nurse who studied economics, who's interested in fiscally sustainable solutions for ongoing health education. Or maybe the ICU nurse who was disheartened by all the frequent readmissions on her unit, and she is passionate about finding ways to reach this population before they end up in the intensive care unit through an outpatient clinic that concentrates on hypertension issues in a low-income neighborhood. Whatever, right? So there's the 2 examples. Another example might be, okay, I'll use myself. I was probably the one who has experience with health education and FQHCs, who is focused on empowering women in these communities through patient-led decision-making. It's probably the thing that I would hope that they think about me. It is the thing I ended up doing. And side note, so FQHC stands for Federally Qualified Health Center. And they're basically centers that have qualified for government funding because they work with a vulnerable population. So it's a good thing to familiarize yourself with and look into. Okay, but that's not the point right now. So take a Post-it, write it down, stick it on your mirror, and when you're practicing these questions, make sure that your responses to these questions say this about you. So speaking of questions, that leads me straight to tip number 2, which is one question that in one form or another, I am certain they're going to ask you. Like, I have not heard of anyone who has been through this process who hasn't been asked this question in one form or another. And it's going to be, why this and not that? And what I mean by that is, why our program and not this university's program? Why DNP and not MSN? Why MSN and not DNP? Why, oh, here's a good one. They ask this one all the time. Why FNP and not adult gero? You need to want to work with peds if you're going to do FNP. So they'll ask you these questions, but they might not ask you specifically why not this. That's not going to be in the question, it's implied. And so I make this point, this distinction, the not just why, but why not something else, because if you think about this and you prepare your answers in this way, not like, you're not going to say like exactly why not this other thing, but your responses to the question are going to have that in it. Then you're going to take your response to this interview question from acceptable to excellent when you're able to be specific with your reasoning. So I feel like this is a really important one for the clients that I work with, for international nurses in general. You're thinking about the big changes for you and the big steps. And so for you, the big why that you're answering is why the United States and why this program, right? Why DNP or nurse practitioner? That's the really big why for you. But you need to keep in mind that in order to have a better answer, you need to be more specific. And so you're answering not just the why nurse practitioner, but why this particular program, why this specialty. And you need to be able to answer that concisely. And so what I would recommend you do is go ahead and write this out and practice it. So speaking of the more frequently asked interview questions, if you want a list of some of the most commonly asked questions, I actually put together a PDF of all these, and it's available free on my website. So my website's listed below, and you can go on my website, click on resources, and there'll be a free PDF for you to download, and so that you could print it out if you want and practice these questions. And so this leads really nicely, actually, into my tip number 3. And so tip number 3 is practice in bullet points, practice in concepts, not in sentences. Do not rehearse full sentences of what you want to say during the interview and memorize them. It doesn't work. I understand that you want your English to be perfect and you want to use all the right phrases and grammar, but I'm begging you to not focus on that. The thing that matters most is the content of what you're saying. And so what you can do is go ahead, and I tell my clients to do this, write out exactly what you're going to say, in an ideal world, like essay form. But then take that and make it into bullet points, and then practice the bullet points. And the reason you want to practice the bullet points is for 2 reasons. One, it's so important that you sound genuine, and that you are genuine when you're doing this interview, and that you don't sound rehearsed and robotic. So that's one reason. And the other one is you need to be flexible when you're talking about things. You want to be able to feel comfortable, not just reciting, but conversing something with your interviewer. And so what you can do is write out bullet points and then practice. And another tip that I have my students do is, and I do this with medical English and with the interview process, is 3 ways to say. So when you come up with how you'll respond to something, make sure you can say it 3 different ways. And that's just to make sure that you can talk about it comfortably. And so practice with someone, practice in the mirror. Of course, you can practice with me, but you don't have to. And so that's what I recommend you do, so that you feel fluid talking about something and you feel comfortable. Although ultimately you're going to get a question that you weren't prepared for. And so tip number 4 is expect the unexpected. So there will be a question that is either phrased in a way that you weren't ready for it, or it's just said a little bit differently, or there might be one that comes completely out of left field. And by the way, so coming out of left field is a phrase that it's an idiom in English that means like coming out of nowhere, coming at you unexpectedly. So coming out of left field. It might be something that you didn't feel prepared for. So anyway, so if you get a question that comes out of left field and you don't know how to respond, you need to be prepared for it. And the only way to be prepared for it is to practice. And so what I do with clients is in the later sessions, getting closer to their interview, when we're doing mock interviews, I try to ask an unexpected question. And so what you can do is practice an unexpected question. And it's because it's important to practice that feeling of, what do I do with that? And staying in interview mode and continuing to speak. And I bring this up because I know when you're not as comfortable in English, there's a really big fear that you're going to go blank, right? That you're going to all of a sudden forget how to answer something, that you're going to freeze up. And that can happen when you get totally caught off guard. And so just get familiar with the feeling of having a question that you weren't prepared for and coming up with an answer, and get comfortable with that. And so practice that with a friend, practice that with a work colleague, but just get comfortable with staying in that interview mindset and answering unexpected questions. And so this leads to the final tip, tip number 5. And tip number 5, I think, is possibly the most important of all, and that is research, research, research. I cannot emphasize this enough. Research the school that you're applying to. Explore their website. Look at what research faculty is putting out right now and what they prioritize. Look at their mission statement and what they're focusing on. Look at what they put about current students that they think are examples of wonderful students in their program, right? So look for all these things. And this is actually part of a much bigger concept that I'm not going to get into here because this video is already getting way too long and it would be hours of me babbling. But I can explain a piece of it here. So what you're going to do is you're going to look for words that you see over and over that seem significant and ask yourself if you know them. Do you know how to use them? And if you don't, Google it, talk to an English-speaking friend. You can always ask me. You can just comment below. I'll see the comments. Comment below and ask me, and I'll answer it for you. And familiarize yourself with the wording, and then figure out which of those words apply to you and what you're interested in and what you're passionate about or what you want to do in the future with your career, and then get comfortable using them. You'll see words like interdisciplinary collaboration. We love talking about interdisciplinary collaboration, so you'll see that one. So look up how that's used, what that means, and that might be something that you're already interested in, already doing at your current job. Or maybe you see phrases like social determinants of health, or lower socioeconomic status, or vulnerable populations, or community engagement, and these all have significant meaning in healthcare and in nursing in the US. So figure out what they mean and then get comfortable using them if it applies to you. And this will help you say the same things that you want to say, but more concisely and more comfortably, and help you understand the language that might be used during an interview process. And so those are my tips for the day. I really hope this helps. Best of luck with your interview process. Of course, you're welcome to email me with questions, or if you're interested in becoming a client. I'd love it if you liked the video. It helps support me, and hit subscribe and that little bell button, and that way you'll find out next time I post a video like this. I'll be posting more videos like this about the interview process and about the admissions process in general, and I'll be posting medical English videos, giving report with other nurses, taking a patient health history, communicating news to family. And if you have any questions or you're interested in working with me, just find me on my website or find me in social media. I'm all over social media, and I will talk to you there.